Today's lesson comes from Job 8, 1 through 10 and 20 through 22. And like normal, I get a lesson that's kind of hard for me to explain to y'all. But in general, I usually get something of that nature. I guess it's trying to teach me a lesson, but anyways. I'm going to go over some of the verses and then I'll touch on them one by one. Then Bildad the Shuhite replied, "How long will you say such things? Your words are blustering wind. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sin. But if you will seek God earnestly and plead with the Almighty, if you are pure and upright, even now, he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your prosperous state. Your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will your future be. Ask the former generation and find out what their ancestors learned. For we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not instruct you and tell you? Will they not bring forth words from their understanding? Surely God does not reject one who is blameless, or strengthen the hands of evildoers. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. Your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more." So that sort of gets us started on what we're going to talk about. Well, if you had your book, it has a little picture down there like Job and then his former friends, or actually friends from many, many years. But from the start of this lesson, he has been sort of like in captivity, and they haven't seen him in a while. So could you imagine not seeing somebody that you know or good friends with for many, many years, and they lost weight and gained, like got older and beard, and sort of like me, no hair. I used to have a bunch of hair, but anyways, getting sort of bald. But anyways, could you imagine over a 10, 15-year period, what changes we go through? And I'm sure all of us have friends that we went to high school with and you don't want to say nothing to, disappoint them or anything, but sort of like what goes on in this lesson. And Bildad, he'll say things that sort of are, sometimes it's better left alone. They'll do things or say things that sort of hurts feelings or misjudges. Let's put it that way. He misjudges certain things. But I'm going to start us off with verse 1. And I'll have to read. I hate reading through this because I feel like I'd rather put it in my own words. Even though right or wrong, I feel better if I do it in my own words. But with this being said, some of these lessons I have to read. So y'all have to excuse me on reading some of this. Man, you can interrupt any time. You got to have a 5-minute period. Oh, Job here. I got, turn back. Chapter 8, 1 through 10. And then 20 through 22. You got it? All right. It says, "Then Bildad the Shuhite replied." All right, so like I said, it's been a long time since he's seen Job, so it says the first verse here doesn't give us a whole lot of information, so I'll just read this. It says, "This is the first instance where Bildad speaks. His origins are mysterious, and there is little information to gather from the biblical text. So Bildad's destination as a Shushite was possibly a tribal name from ancient ancestry. So sort of starts us out with he's going to talk with Job, and they're going to correlate together. But like I said, some of the words he mentions and does, some of the things he does is sort of like puts him on a spot, sort of hurts his feelings. How long will you say such things? Your words are a blustering wind. So when Job spoke, Bildad says, your words are like a blustering wind. So it's one of those things where when y'all meet and talk it over, some things you say may hinder the other. It says, Bildad speaks far as a lengthy layman spoken by Job. Such things spoken by Job consist of his bemoaning the unjust nature of his suffering. Job did not question God's sovereignty, but questioned the wisdom of his friends. So he's actually saying, I never doubted Jesus. I never blamed Jesus for any of this. I'm sort of like putting the blame on other people. And it says, Bildad did not waste time expressing his disapproval of Job's language. By describing Job's words as a blustering wind, Bildad used Job's own word against him. To Bildad, Job's words, while desperate, were meaningless and empty. Now, right here is the one where it says that Job reeled over his multitude of losses. Most significantly, the death of his children should give us a sense of how hurtful Bildad's reply must have felt to Job. Bildad was, after all, one of Job's closest friends. So there's certain things you can say that can hinder and hurt a person more than help them. And I didn't know exactly how many children Job had, but I got to reading further on in the text, and he had 10 children, and all of them passed away. And there was many more scenarios that happened to him where he's real loyal to God, but it's almost like I heard the old saying, if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. Well, he's sort of like one of these people he's righteous to God, but I think no matter what happens, there's always a hurtful side that he sees, or something happens to his relatives or kin, or nothing can go right. He can do so much, but nothing goes right. And he's just one of those that's cursed, I guess, cursed. Let's see, let's go with verse 3. Does God pervert justice? Does the Almighty pervert what is right? So we still got Bildad speaking here, and he's sort of getting some of this text out of tolerance. In other words, he's speaking, but he don't really put it in perspective. He's trying to put a lot of blame on Job himself. It says, God never uses unjust comments or falsified language. The Almighty does no wrong in justice. So we may do wrong, but God don't do wrong. So you got to make sure that you put that in perspective. Verse 4. When your children sinned against him, he gave them over to the penalty of their sins. Bildad used Job's deceased children to illustrate his assumptions about the matter of God's justice. So there we go. He's, using God. He says, well, your kids were sinners. God did this. Previously, the actions of his children greatly concerned Job. Job would make arrangements for them to be purified because they have sinned and cursed God in their hearts. What Bildad proposed provides an example of retribution, justice. So that sort of gives you one scenario of how Bildad used his children against Job. It says, however, God sometimes worked differently. Perhaps he chastises the righteous in order for their future to be refined. So it's sort of like us out here. We can get on everything be going good, and, it's hunky-dory. Then all of a sudden we'll get on a trend that nothing's going right, and we sort of turn turbulent. We don't use God. We may ask God for something, but we sort of turn bad, and we do bad and indifferent things where we should stay true to God through good and in just times. We need to stay true to Him at all times. In other words, don't use the roller coaster effect, up and down, up and down. Stay true to God. The existence of physical and material blessings does not correlate to a person's spiritual vitality. A righteous individual may experience hardships and suffering. So that goes to show you right there. We all experience hardships and sufferings. No matter how good you do, somewhere down the line, something's going to happen. Something's going to break. You want to go get on your lawnmower, it's broke, you can't mow. You want to do something else, farm equipment, anything. You know what I'm saying? Even at work. Does it all go good at the telephone place? Anyways, I'm trying to cover every basis out here. I know at the hospital it's indifferent. And, I use my work too. It's like Monday, like this whole week, man. I said, what the world did I do wrong this week to suffer like this? Anyways, it ended up turning out good. But it got good down at the end of the week. I was like a little worried there to start off with. And I said, anyways, it's just one of those things we've got to go through. Ultimately, it was not up to Job or Bildad to explain Job's hardships and suffering. So, with this being said, Bildad is trying his best to pinpoint something on Job. And he'd be better off to just hush up. Instead, their interaction highlights that a silence, like a silence, is often can provide the best comfort. So, sort of like, ever heard that old saying, open mouth, insert foot? Well, I look at this like that, man. But anyways, he'd be better off to be quiet. Bildad could have better served his friend through comfort of silence, and as he started out doing. All right, verses 5. But if you will seek God earnestly and plead with the Almighty, Bildad transitioned from condemnation to extortion or extortion. Bildad concluded that Job was less sinful than others because the Lord spared Job's life. So now he's actually sort of turning the table a little bit, seeing a different version. Let's see, okay. And at least for the time being. And in this perspective, unless Job did plead to the mercy of the Almighty, there was no guarantee that his life would be spared. The time for Job's lament had passed, and Bildad challenged him to seek God earnestly and make requests of God in a rapid and timely manner. So it's sort of like finding a turning point now. Verses 6. If you are pure and upright, even now he will rouse himself on your behalf and restore you to your prosperous state. So I'm going to put it in a perspective, sort of like you can go down the road and your tank's almost empty. So sooner or later you're going to have to stop and get fuel. Where you look it up there in the sign, 339 or whatever, you got to get gas no matter what. Well, you keep procrastinating and running lower and lower. Well, sooner or later, you're going to run out. So I sort of look at it like Job needs to get restored, get his life restored. In other words, he needs to be filled up with God's blessings. And to do that, he needs to repent and do the things that God wants him to do. So if you don't learn nothing else out of this, let's think of that gas hand dropping down. We need to restore our life with Jesus Christ throughout each and every day and each week. Verses 7. Your beginnings Seem humble, so prosperous will your future be. So, like I said, we're starting to turn the table. We're starting to go from bad to a better sign here. And it says, at the onset of Job's story, he said to be the greatest man among all the people of the East. Bildad argued that if Job sought God and returned to righteousness, then he would experience an increase in prosperity, and his previous life would seem humble in comparison. This verse reveals one of the greatest ironies in the book of Job, and perhaps all the Bible. Bildad's words were unknowingly prophetic in describing Job's future. Eventually, Job was granted more children and more wealth, but not because of Bildad's advice. So, he sort of renewed himself. He had more kids and a prosperous life and plenty of wealth from what we see here. So we can also do that in our lives, just turn to Jesus Christ, keep him first in our life. Verses 8. Ask for the former generation and find out what their ancestors learned. It says, recognizing the limitations of his experience, Bildad appealed to the tradition of the former generation. Perhaps Bildad anticipated that a search of what their ancestors learned would confirm his view of God's justice, thus making clear Job's next steps. Bildad's error, though, came in assuming that the tradition may have inherited was normal. It is one thing to accept tradition with a critical eye. It is something else altogether to use and draw uncritical, sweeping generalizations. The latter is more what Bildad seemed to do to bolster his claims about the nature of God's justice. So he was using, generations back and trying to look through Job and see if, I guess, his upbringings were evil or something. In other words, it's a lot of, like they say is, like if you bring kids up in life, you got to teach them from the get-go, You can't help what they do later on in life, but as long as they under your household, you can do the best you can with them. And, the upbringing is the most important thing in life. Teach them like what, we hear all the time is like, teach them scriptures, and that way they can learn and maybe have good one or two, or if not many scriptures that they can recite and stuff, and share that information. Verses 9 and 10. For we were born only yesterday and know nothing, and our days on earth are but a shadow. Will they not instruct you and tell you? Will they not bring forth words from their understanding? It says here, like Bildad, we're faced with a crisis. We might be tempted to provoke comfort or provide comfort by appealing to past experiences, whether personal or antecedent. The impulse to do so might arise from our feelings of discomfort and inadequate during the crisis, especially if we struggle with what to do or say. In moments when we feel a sense of discomfort, we can remember Bildad's approach and behave differently, choosing to be present and quiet if necessary. So, if you're uncomfortable about a situation, I would say be quiet. Because sometimes if we don't know the experience that someone's went through, we'd be better off. Now, with that being said, there's nothing wrong with being there, giving that person comfort. Just because you don't say, and I know I have to use my dad for example. He hardly ever said anything. But a lot of times he was there helping people do stuff. And sometimes I just wonder, that's probably the best thing. He didn't talk a whole lot, but somebody asked him to do something, he'd drop what he'd do. Mama may not have liked it, but he would drop what he would do to go help somebody. But he didn't say a whole lot. And I thought about that as I was reading through this. So, and I know people are different. Some people are gifted at talking. I use Jairus. I think Jairus would be great, gifted person for talking and expressing something. Many others too, but what I'm trying to say is from what I've learned in past experience, you can go to anyone in here and get help, or, they will help you through any crisis you're faced with. I ain't no person in here I couldn't turn to. Anyways, I just look at that as a big, way to help people through our generation. I got off on a tangent there. Anyways, I'm going to go, it skips over to verse 20 now. Surely God does not reject one who is blameless or strengthen the hands of evildoers. So Bildad continued to project assumptions of God's justice. The Hebrew word translated blameless here is also translated that way in Job, which establishes that Job was indeed blameless and upright. But Bildad seems to have been looking at Job's tragedies to conclude the opposite. Thus, Bildad has constructed, in other words, he was looking at the evil stuff. He wasn't looking at the good stuff. He was looking at evil. So could you imagine, like going and talking with somebody, and the more evil you talk, and they're there, their confidence level's got to be beaten down. Take a hammer and just beat a nail on a piece of wood. Their confidence level is dropping. You're just beating them down. So we need to pick people up instead of beat them down. The problem lies in the specific premises, which everyone assumed to be true, but the narrative of the first two chapters of this book, unknown to Job and his friends, informs us otherwise. The flip side of the idea is to find in the tradition of biblical wisdom literature that describes the righteous experience God's blessings. These individuals are like well-watered plants. So you do know well-watered plant will grow. We can't overwater, but we can make sure they get water. I was just sort of put this in comparison. It's sort of how ironic how things go. I thought I was doing something good, like last spring. I took some of my compost, which had goat litter in it and stuff. Well, I go put it on. Well, I spilt some of it, a little more, and I didn't blend it in with the soil. So I thought, man, it'll grow. I plant my stuff over there. I go over there and I plant it, and it come up, man. About 2 weeks later, it was about as brown as some of these chairs in here. I thought, what the world? But anyways, that goes to show, you can water something too much or put too much fertilizer or whatever, and it'll die. That's sort of like grass and stuff that you plant. You gotta know what you're doing. You can overdo it. You might thinking you're doing good. It's like oil in a, reservoir, anything. Put too much, it harms it. So we got to be, and put everything in perspective. And I use Robin as like IVs and stuff. You got to know what you're doing. You can't overdo it. So we got to have the right ratio. 21. He will yet fill your mouth with laughter and your lips with shouts of joy. What greater satisfactions can we, ask for if we do what he wants us to do? For God to fill his mouth with laughter and his lips with shouts of joy after recovering from such a prolonged lame. And it says a personal loss, intense pain, and it's ongoing things that he suffered from. It says, but Bildad's implied solution that Job need to repent follows from defective reasoning. So I guess before we say anything, we need to have the facts. If you're talking harsh or something, we need solid facts. And that way, at least you'll have evidence to back it up. And I think of lawyers and stuff, you know. Sometimes I wonder how many people's innocent when they go to prison or something. But anyways, it's hard facts, you know, to back stuff up. 22, your enemies will be clothed in shame, and the tents of the wicked will be no more. The false logic continue as Bildad again unknowingly spoke product words towards Job. Yet this time Bildad's words addressed his own future situation before God. Bildad and he had two other friends. It's almost like they was trying to chastise him for their own sins. You know what I'm saying? Like, talk bad to this person, try to put him on your level. Where it's just funny how it goes. They was chastising for their own sins. And in conclusion, it says, being present to someone in the midst of the tragedy presents unique challenges. In an effort to explain these sufferings, we may put too much pressure on ourselves to comfort in a wrong way. So we're likely to overstep the bounds of what is helpful. At best, our words might be little more than palatable cliches. At worst, they might cause further harm. So, that being said, we got to be careful how we speak and what we say. Bildad's counterproduction interacts with Job's, which reminds us of the best ministry we might offer, the ministry of the presence in the midst of difficult seasons. At first, Job's friends approached him in the matter, but their silent presence changed to unhelpful arguments. So it's saying when they were silent, they was more helpful. But when they started speaking, it just got out of context. And like I said, they was trying to cover up a lot of their wickedness. However, Bildad's logic did not account for the entire story of how God works. In reality, wicked individuals might experience blessings, while righteous individuals might experience suffering. No one or everyone present in Job's suffering was an example of the latter. When others experience suffering, our natural response is to be with them, to draw near, cry, and share in grief is an appropriate course of our actions to comfort the sufferer. And on God's behalf is likewise or unwise and unnecessary. Sitting silently with a grieving person often provides the best support. And that's all I have, but that last little bit there reminds me of like when someone passes away and we go, funeral home or whatever. Some people, like I said, hadn't seen each other in a while. They get a little loud, but most people are pretty quiet, crying or sharing tears with, close ones. So sometimes it's best to just be silent. Be there, but be silent. And anybody got anything to add? Because I got about probably 10 more minutes. But anyways, that's all I have. I appreciate y'all bearing with me. I tell you what, oh yeah. Oh yeah, yep. yeah.
Great things in my truck for my name's sake. Sometimes we have to suffer for our Lord, for He suffers.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
That's how we've been redeemed. The most precious blood shed on that cross. I remember Brother Ollie May, and I tell him, Sister Man Bonnie gone, and said that God used to get me when He got in my life. It's not all about me.
Yeah, you doing,
Not bad. Yeah, I just don't quite so tame. And my mama, she came down on me. She said, boy, have you lost your mind? You don't go around breaking into the neighbor's house. I raised you know right from wrong.
mm-hmm.
I couldn't look at it. My head was understanding because the truth hurts,
Oh, yeah.
but the truth is what makes us free. And I was in jail locked up in the Moore County jail for being a thief that came in the night. And I could hear Mom, how she raised me. She said, my daddy raised me like this. If you do wrong, you own up to it and tell the truth. God take more of it. And the preacher gave me a Bible. First one I've ever given. And I sing that scripture, the truth will make you free.
Mm-hmm.
And that little voice is writing Detective 11 and tell him if you want to see. I didn't even consult the lawyer. She came down on me because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I wrote him that letter. And them boys in jail said, you're crazy. Said, you can beat this. You've never been in trouble. I said, how can I beat the truth
Mm-hmm.
with a lie?
Yeah.
Because God, He's the truth. Satan follows lies. He said, I lied when I got in there. I feared. I said, I found that gun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know they haven't, but they got one of the guns that I stole to get crack cocaine. And, but you know, I done what that little voice told. I didn't listen to what man told me. I listened to what the Word of God told me. And, you know, that little voice of my mom, how, you know, she was raised.
Mm-hmm.
She only had a second grade education, but she was sharp as a draw, like your did. She dropped what she done help somebody. And that's my definition of a true Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how God wants us all to be, to love one another. And anyway, but getting back to that, and things just got worse. And everything is detected. I had my 39th birthday. 4 days later, my mama died. And I'm not being nothing but disappointed about it. And my friends held me while I cried.
Well, we'll all be praying for you, Jimmy. Thinking the best.
Through all that, a new sergeant took over the jail. And it was like God gave me faith
Mm-hmm.
in His eyes because I told the truth. And finally the detective came and he said, I want to apologize for not coming to see your son, but we had 2 murder problems. So he said, I'm sorry to hear about your mom.
Mm-hmm.
And that meant so much to me. But they asked me about breaking in one house. He said, what about these other 2? Now there I was, but I go lie again. I know they hit me on more charges, so I just confessed to it all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Word of God says with the mouth, confession is made salvation.
Yep.
Truth does set us free.
Yep.
Because God, He's the Spirit. We know that we've got to work with Him in the Spirit and in truth.
Yep.
We can't cover nothing up. We think we can.
Oh, he knows.
Getting away with it. My mom even said, boy, you might think you're fooling people.
Yeah.
You can at times, but you can't fool the man of God.
No.
And, you know, but I know I might have said too much, but we never really been able to tell that in the church. It was something that's been in my heart for a long time. I never did know when it would come out. But
Well, we'll be thinking about you and praying for you too, because it sounds like you're getting on the right road now.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I'm nothing. I'm just like y'all. I'm nothing talking to you.
Hey,
We can't do
we'll
nothing.
give him all the glory.
Give him his word enough. When we do that, he's showing us. Man,
Yep.
that's so cool.
Yep,
He's the joy of our, he's the joy of him, not truth.
yep,
You know, because his faith on what the word of God says.
yep.
If we don't do it the way God's word tells us to do, it ain't gonna work. Now, I used to tell me that.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll die for the Lord Jesus. Now, let me ask you a question. Which is easier? To die for the Lord?
Yep, that's exactly.
It always get me.
Recite.
Now, which is easier? To die for the Lord or live for him? It's easier to die.
It is.